The newest Five Nights at Freddy's game, Help Wanted 2, comes out in literally 6 days. Like, this still doesn't even feel real. But as the week before a new FNAF game comes, so does my best prediction. If you've been watching the channel and podcast for about the past month or so, then you probably have a pretty good idea what I'm going to say. So let's not waste any more time preambling. Slices, put on your aprons, and let's prep ourselves a prediction. So consider this your final spoiler warning. For legal reasons, this is a joke. I don't actually know anything that is currently unreleased. If I'm right, Steel Wool, I promise I don't have anyone on the inside, I just got lucky. For the first chunk of today's video, we're going to chronicle all teasers and trailers leading up to the game, as well as a speculative timeline for where the game might be placed. That way, when we're in the second half and I'm giving the prediction, I don't need to reference as much and you know where I'm coming from. In June's PlayStation Showcase, we got the first teaser trailer for Help Wanted 2, which showed us the sister location elevator crashing through its elevator shaft. All the while, Hand Unit welcomed us back for another week and that we did an adequate enough job the first time. So we've been here before, presumably. The posters in the elevator shaft have been tweaked as well. Notably on the bottom left, there's one with Bonbon and Bonette being hit by a hammer. This is later known as Bonkabon that we'll get into. Another huge important change is that this elevator has changed itself. There's been an addition in the bottom right, one of the wire puzzles from Ruin, something that would have only been around during the Pizzaplex. The teaser ends with a Ballora jump scare, but something notable happens just before that in my opinion. Once we enter the darkness, there is a shushing sound that can be heard. Now, this might be nothing. It might just be some pipes going by or the doors settling, but between shushing being something that the marionette does and the fact that the hallucinogenic gas in the books is described as a shushing sound, I think this noise is relevant to at least bring up. It might be nothing, but it's worth mentioning. In between then and now, we got apparent radio silence from Steel Wool, and I say apparently because some fans argue that they've been actually seeding things out on social media ever since. For anyone that doesn't know, Steel Wool had been posting something called Guess the Sketch since May of this year on Twitter. It started out being all over the place. Essentially, they would post a sketch of something and we'd have to guess, and we'd have like a day to figure it out. And it was random, things like Blip from Space Ghost, Sonic Shoes, or Combat Carl from Toy Story. But then, right around August 28th, notably after Ruin had already come out, Steel Wool started adding other tags to their Guess the Sketch post. Quote, #Ruin, #Security Breach, #Ruin DLC, #FNAF. So what have those Guess the Sketch posts been since then? It could very well still be nothing. But some folks in the community have suggested that these tagged posts hide deeper meanings. Here's the best I could come up with. Again, this might feel like a stretch, but who knows, it might be relevant. It's worth looking into at least. The first one was the Fairchild Channel F, the first video game console based on a microprocessor, and it was released in 1976. Now, this might just be a reference to the 70s being important, as that's when Fredbear's Family Diner would have been made somewhere in the 70s. There's a very, very small chance that maybe this is implying Fredbear's was founded in 1976. After all, the Fairchild Channel F was a new innovation of technology, and so would have Fredbear's been. But again, huge stretch there. Regardless, it's queuing us up to the 70s being important. The next Guess the Sketch was of Figaro Foe. Now, this is a character from a 2015 cartoon. The date doesn't seem important there. What does seem relevant, though, is that it's a character who, in the cartoon, has every known phobia. Now, this isn't anything specific, but I think this is more so a reference to Tales from the Pizzaplex. After all, many of the stories within Tales from the Pizzaplex are just titled different phobias, so that's pretty thematic. The next one was literally the crying child. I don't think I need to tell you why that could be important. After that, it was the cover of the NES game Fester's Quest. The game came out in 1989, which may or may not be a relevant date, but once again we are looking at the past. After all, the Addams Family originally aired 1964 to 1966, so 60s, 70s, early FNAF timeline. And the last Guess the Sketch I think is honestly the strangest one. It's the only one that has two separate characters, it's the only one that uses a different method of sketching, aka this kind of format. And 3, the characters themselves are just really strange. It was Andre the Giant and Metal Sonic. Now, this is probably the biggest stretch I've ever said on my channel and maybe ever going forward, but bake with me for a second. And I really need to emphasize, when I say bake with me for a second, what I'm about to say might just straight up be wrong. So take this with a grain of salt, I beg you, but hear me out. Metal Sonic, I think, could be a nod to the Mimic. After all, it's a robot built to replicate something else. And I know, that's kind of a stretch, but that's also kind of understandable. It's like, okay, Metal Sonic is literally a mimicking robot. I could see that. But if that's the case, why is it being paired with Andre the Giant? Well, for anyone that doesn't know, Andre the Giant is a pro wrestler turned actor from the mid to late 1900s who suffered from gigantism because of excess growth hormones. This caused him to be 7'4" and 520 pounds. Now again, he got his start in pro wrestling, but a lot of people nowadays know him more for his acting career. In fact, I don't think it's any kind of a stretch to argue that 90% of the people nowadays who know Andre the Giant probably know him from one of his most famous roles, Fezzik from The Princess Bride. I know at least most people in my generation first go, oh hey, it's Fezzik from The Princess Bride. So why do I mention all of this? Well, the movie The Princess Bride came out in 1987. You could argue, again, this could all be wrong, take it with a grain of salt. You could argue that Steelwool posted a representation of the Mimic and an actor from a famous movie that came out in 1987. So is this Steelwool directly confirming that the Mimic did the bite of 87? No, but it's interesting to think about. Maybe there is some correlation with whatever happened in 1987 and the Mimic. Maybe. Very, very maybe. But not to mention, this is also the last Guess the Sketch since September 26th. They have not posted since then. At least not posted a Guess the Sketch. So whatever this was, meant to end it. After that, we see 3 of the games from Help Wanted shown off at PAX. And thanks to Steelwool, they allowed some YouTubers to record footage, so we got to see it. They showed off Bonkabon, referencing that poster I mentioned earlier, where it's just whack-a-mole but with Bonbon, Bonette, Scrap Baby plushes, and avoiding Helpy. Notably, it looks like it takes place in a Security Breach Pizzaplex arcade. Granted, this wasn't the final version of the game, but it's worth mentioning. The second game they showed off is the reimagining of the Breaker Room section from Sister Location. Now, as we're doing breakers, instead of checking on Freddy and playing a room sound, we have to constantly look for Freddy and use a directional megaphone to keep him away. The third game showed off was Carousel, where a player is repairing fuses inside of a carousel while defending themselves from Moon. This sort of functions as the first teaser of gameplay since Steelwool knew that it was going to be uploaded to YouTube. Finally, a few weeks ago, we got the combo of the big blog post from PlayStation and the full gameplay trailer. I've gone over it heavily on this channel before, so I'm only going to go over some of the relevant information for today's video. If you want to know the full breakdown of the trailer and blog post, the video's right there. In the blog post, it's clear that we're going to be a worker at the Pizzaplex. Not only that, but we are, quote, the last human employee left. Whether or not this is a VR simulation of working at the Pizzaplex or actually doing it, it's still not confirmed either way. The post also tells us the categories of games that we'll be playing. Quote, Backstage, Staff Only, Fazcade, Food Prep, Ticket Booth, and FNAF Sister Location. It also mentions near the end that the majority of the game will be narrated by Mystic Hippo, which, by the way, we just got a teaser image of yesterday of her. So, based. The trailer itself mostly just showed us different games that we'll be playing, including all 3 games shown off at PAX. However, some notable things is that we hear it's our first day of work, which goes against what we heard in the first teaser. The opening slideshow looks much more realistic than anything in Help Wanted 1, implying this could be taking place in the real world, and we get more shots of Sister Location, and we even see Scrap Baby. We actually see Scrap Baby twice, one in this area, and again her updated jump scare to close out the trailer. So that is, in my opinion, all the relevant information from new posts and publications about Help Wanted 2. But what about the FNAF timeline surrounding this game? Now, I'll try to stick to things we know for almost certain here. For example, it's stated and shown multiple times that we will be at the Pizzaplex for this game. Whether or not it's a VR recreation of the Pizzaplex, still no way to confirm that, but we're going to be at the Pizzaplex. And if we're at the Pizzaplex, as far as placement goes in the timeline, we're definitely taking place after Help Wanted 1. After all, in the last update for Help Wanted 1, there was the secret ending where you do Pizza Party, but instead of being stuffed, you go out a side door and you can see the Pizzaplex being built. So we know that the Pizzaplex was being built around the same time Help Wanted was meant to be released. And we're also fairly certain that Security Breach has to take place after Help Wanted 2. After all, if we are actually in the Pizzaplex, it can't take place after Security Breach. No matter which ending you get in Security Breach, and no matter which ending is canon, we know that Ruin happens afterwards. And if Ruin happens, happens after Security Breach, the Pizzaplex is demolished. So if we're at the Pizzaplex in Help Wanted 2, it has to be before Security Breach and after Help Wanted 1, which is honestly a pretty specific timeline placement for a FNAF game. However, it wouldn't be FNAF if there wasn't some problems with that timeline placement. Namely, the fact that, and I've mentioned this before, the fun times are here, and Scrap Baby is here. After Sister Location, all the Funtime animatronics shed their shells and fuse into Ennard, and Ennard leaves the bunker. So if the Funtimes are still walking around, it would have to take place before Sister Location. And then by FNAF 6, Ennard has split into Scrap Baby and Molten Freddy, and at the end of FNAF 6, they both melt. So as of Security Breach, neither the Funtimes nor Scrap Baby should be still around, let alone them both being around at the same time. Keep in mind, Ennard is what turns into Scrap Baby, so the Funtimes and Scrap Baby can't coexist. I mean, hell, one of the Funtimes is Circus Baby. How could these two exist at the same time? I'll be attempting to answer that in the prediction, so let's get into that prediction. And the best part about putting this video out right now is that, like I said, the game comes out on the 14th. I'll be playing it live on this channel the minute it drops, unless it drops at like 4 AM or something. So that way we'll learn very soon if I'm right or not. Not only that, but next week's video on the 15th will be the full plot and lore summary of Help Wanted 2. So within a week, we'll be able to compare and contrast my prediction with the reality and see if I was any close. So if you want to see both of those, please just, the subscribe button is right there. Just give it a little tickle, little push, little shove. It means the world to me. Thank you so much. Anyway, on to the prediction. The game begins and we are playing as Vanessa, sitting in on an automated orientation for her new job as head security guard at the Pizzaplex. We learn of the various duties we'll have while working there, and then we can start the game. This functions sort of as the rail ride from the first game. The first half of this game will see us playing through the games we've heard about in these blog posts. Normally, essentially, we're doing our job as Vanessa, probably collecting coins again, but not tapes this time. Instead, I think we'll be collecting various crafting supplies throughout the minigames. Things like white fabric, ribbons, eyes, buttons. I think we'll be making the Vanny mask that she wears in Security Breach. Before Ruin, I was willing to believe that this mask we see in Help Wanted and the Security Breach trailers, and this mask we see Vanny wear are the same thing. Just a cool redesign that made the Vanny model look nicer. But then, Ruin brought the Vanny mask. And yes, I'm going to be purposely mispronouncing it. I know it's pronounced Vanny, but just to differentiate them easily, I'll be saying Vanny when referring to this mask. Oh, have fun in the Pizzaplex. He almost made it the whole video. I'm proud of him. You'll see him again in the outro. At this point, I'm convinced that these are two separate masks. One of them, this one, is what turns you into a glitch trap servant. It's what Vanessa collects at the end of the DLC. It's what Cassie uses during Ruin. Whereas this one is something Vanessa made to allow her to still access the AR world. How fitting is it then that in Help Wanted 1, we are collecting this Vanny mask, and in Help Wanted 2, we're creating this Vanny mask. Once the mask itself is complete, we unlock the hard mode levels of Help Wanted 2. In the normal game, we're just doing our job as Fazbear intends. But in hard mode, I think we'll be modifying the Pizzaplex to allow Glitch Trap to take over. The perfect example of this, I think, can be found in Backstage. So we know for a fact that Backstage is going to have us up close and personal with the animatronics. At least it's confirmed that this minigame from the trailer where we're doing a Roxy makeover is one of the Backstage minigames. Well, if our normal duties is doing something like testing out Roxy's makeover functions, I could see a Vanny hard mode minigame being this one from the trailer, where we're modifying Glamrock Freddy, possibly inputting the Glitch Trap program inside of programming. After all, this minigame, Roxy's on and active, looking around, we're in her makeup room, it just makes sense. But this one, we're in some back room, and Freddy's seemingly off. I think these two aspects are the majority of the game. So I hear you. What about the ending? What about the fun times? And what about Scrap Baby? We'll go chronologically. Scrap Baby, I think, makes a decent amount of sense. Look at where we see her. We're in a room with a monitor that plays distracting advertisements with a vent to one side. Doesn't this room look familiar? I think this minigame is Vanessa literally practicing working on robotics to get ready for Vanny to work on Burn Trap. And she'd be doing this in that buried FNAF 6 location under the Pizzaplex, which is where Scrap Baby was last located. But if Scrap Baby is still there, did Henry do nothing? Did he kill himself for no reason? After all, at the end of FNAF 6, all the animatronics and people in that building were meant to be burned into nothing. But again, look at the quote from the schematic we're using to infer this. Quote, "There is a possibility that over overheating might neutralize the effects permanently. On one hand, the word might is there, so you could argue that Williams' hypothesis was wrong and it didn't neutralize it. But that's not even necessary to explain Scrap Baby's presence here. Henry's plan might still have worked, and he might have neutralized all the remnant that was in those animatronics. But nowhere do we know the melting point of the animatronics themselves. Let's say it worked. Overheating it neutralized all the remnant in, for example, Scrap Baby, and melted away all of the spirit inside of her. Would it have also melted the animatronic? Is it not possible that the remnant was burned out, but the robots remain? If that's the case, many Fazbear and associated animatronics built by these two are programmed to seek out noise. It's like a party thing. And if that's the case, this minigame could literally be us up against the original programming of Circus Baby. It's not that Scrap Baby is haunted by Elizabeth and trying to kill Vanessa, it's that we're making noise near Circus Baby, and she's going to check it out. But once she realizes she's alone with another person, she scoops you. After all, her jump scare uses her scooper arm. Alright, so then what about the fun times? I'm honestly still a little stumped with this one, but I have a pretty solid idea on how it could work. It's not very evidence-backed, but it's more so a logical conclusion. If Help Wanted 2 is meant to explain how Security Breach came to be, why not also Help Wanted 1? We know that Glitch Trap initially forms because when they were creating Help Wanted 1, Fazbear gave them a lot of old technology to scan into the video game, and one of those pieces of technology, when scanned in, materialized Glitch Trap. These sister location minigames could show us Fazbear going back to that bunker to get stuff for the future. After all, the sister location bunker has just collected dust throughout this timeline when it's not in use. It's never been confirmed to have been destroyed. It's possible that before sister location happened, someone from Fazbear went down there to collect anything they could find, but now in Help Wanted 2, we're seeing the tapes or logs of whoever did that. That way we can still have sister location gameplay this far into the timeline. Does it make a lot of sense? I don't know, but it's honestly the only explanation I can think of until the game comes out. And finally, what is the ending going to be? Again, I lean on Help Wanted 1. Canonically, Help Wanted ends with Vanessa's mind being taken over by Glitch Trap, and we see that in some of the endings, arguably best represented with this one when we're locked in that metal door. By the end of Help Wanted 1, Glitch Trap has a human asset. I think Help Wanted 2 will function the same way, but this time with Gregory. I think the ending of this new game will have us strapping Gregory into some kind of on-rails ride, probably even giving him the Van Eye mask. It'll take him through the daycare into that daycare room that we find with all that secret lore stuff. Note the moving sun in the trailer for Help Wanted 2. Eventually, it might even lead him to the Balloon World arcade machine or something similar. Then Glitch Trap will take over his mind, giving us GGY, the Vanny version of Gregory. Real quick, before we go into the outro, I wanted to showcase more fan art on this channel because I see so much of it on Twitter, and it's so cool, and the one fan art a week thing was a fun idea, but it was hard to keep up with. For my sake, if you have ever posted fan art or you're going to post fan art, use hashtag RyTart. I want to put it all under hashtag RyTart. That way I can find it on Twitter or Instagram and I can showcase them on the channel. Oh, only post it with that hashtag if you're comfortable with me showcasing it with your handle on these videos. And I'll just have like a scroll by of the most, like the 5 most recent fan arts as I do the outro. And I know it's Rytoast art, but also like tart is a pastry, so RyTart. It was either that or Ryfart, so be happy you got what you got. But that's it. My best guess for the lore and plot of Help Wanted 2. Like I said, we'll be streaming it as soon as it comes out, so we will find out together how wrong I am. But if you wanted to make your own prediction and you could use a refresher of the recent lore that is relevant for Help Wanted 2, I made a whole video on it last week you can check out right here. In the meantime, a huge shout out to the best channel members around, the Dough Risers, and until next time, as always, stay toasty, slices.